Rejoice, everyone. We're back with another Sekhie Reacts to Fate. This time, Semiramis, or the...
Shammuramat?
Yes.
I didn't think you were going to manage to do that at an angle, I'm going to be honest. So I figured I'd just step in. So kudos for anyone who actually got the reference, because it was to the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And what's really funny is that I did eventually figure it out. So she is associated with the Hanging Gardens of Babylon by one author in antiquity. Just one. Ironically, I did actually pull a lot from him. So like, you know, I found it eventually, but it is one of those things where like some people, there's a lot of places online where they describe the Hanging Gardens and they say, also used to be known as like Semiramis's Hanging Gardens. And then when you look at like the citations and the links, they just go in like this circular form where they just lead back to one another after a few different websites. And so it can be really hard to figure it out. You have to find like the one specific set of articles that actually gives the name of the author.
It's funny because like in the brief wiki surfing I do for my own like notes for research prior to this, it doesn't mention the Hanging Gardens like at all on her actual Wikipedia page, but it does mention her on the Hanging Gardens page.
It's a fun fact. So, because I also look at Wikipedia, that's where I start a lot of the time, right? If I don't know the serve it. It's mentioned on the Shammuramat page, but not on the Semiramis page, which are two separate Wikipedia pages with actually different information depicted between two of them.
Which is funny because then they talk about, they say Semiramis in the Garden of... the Hanging Gardens of Babylon page.
Because the Shammuramat page has a section on, as you can see here, the Semiramis legend, right? Which is where it's featured. But then on the Semiramis page, it has a section on the historical figure, which is separate. So that gave me a fun runaround when I was doing the research for this. Because
what happened with that artist last time?
No, because I was trying so hard to figure out, because you mentioned to me I should do the Hanging Gardens, and it wasn't showing up on the pages that I was looking at or in any of the articles. And obviously I'm not reading, I was not reading Ctesias of Cnidus' like one-to-one original work, right? Like I'm reading other academics paraphrasing and discussing it. So like I'm obviously not reading his one-to-one work. So it was like I was just really struggling to find it until like that last second when I finally managed to figure it out. But anyways, Lady Shammuramat. So it seems prudent perhaps to first talk about Lady Shammuramat if we're going to discuss the character of Semiramis. I would assume that Fate likely relies more on the legendary Semiramis and the biblical references, but those are embellishments upon a pre-existing historical character and historical events, so we should start with said historical events. So the Lady Shammuramat was a queen of the Neo-Assyrian Empire and the wife of King Shamshi-Adad V. She was the mother of Adad-nirari III, during whose reign she held unprecedented power for a woman. Now, some sources will say that she reigned as a regent for 5 years at the beginning of his reign, but that is actually attributed to a mistranslation of a stela done by a historian about 100 years ago. And we've now corrected that translation, and we don't think it directly translates to reigning as a regent for him. So, while her title might have been that of primary consort to the king and then father of the young king, the amount of power that we think she was able to exercise means that she was likely at the very least what we would equate to a co-regent, if not regent for her son. Of all the Assyrian rulers, she's the only queen who has managed to retain her strength and position after the death of her husband, and the only known Assyrian woman to lead a military campaign. For her power and influence, she was immortalized first as the queen, and then later as a legendary warrior queen and heroine, attributed to be a demigod, the daughter of Atargatis, and wife of the mythical founder of Nineveh, Ninus. Because the records we have of her husband and her son, we know approximately when the lady lived. We know that she was probably born somewhere around the year 850 BCE and probably died around 798 at about the age of 52. Unfortunately, there are no contemporary sources to tell us where she might have come from. Later classical traditions would say that she was perhaps a native Assyrian or Mesopotamian, or that she might have come from the Levant region. Various archaeologists and historians have put forward proposals as to where she might have come from, but none are substantiated by any contemporary evidence. Exceedingly little is known about her during the reign of her husband, as in fact her name was only found to be inscribed on a single eye bead in the entire archaeological record for that period of her life, the bead reading, "To Ishtar her lady, Shammuramat, queen of Shamshi-Adad, king of Assyria, dedicated this for her well-being." That is the only evidence we have of her existence during the reign of her husband. That's it. However, the archaeological and historical records then contain a relative explosion of information about her upon the beginning of the reign of her son. Based on what we know about her son, it's not likely that he was underage when he came to power, but he was very young, and this youth is likely how she was allowed to maintain such a prominent role, although we don't have sources that give us an exact accounting of what her place at court might have been, beyond being the mother of the king. Typically, Assyrian queens would fade into obscurity after the deaths of their husbands, as they would not maintain places at court under the reigns of their sons or stepsons. Some scholarship in the last 20 years has claimed that her continued relevance was possibly because she was queen regnant at the time, or co-regent with her son during his early years. There is still debate on this. Not all historians agree, with later Assyrian sources not representing her existence, perhaps because the presence of a strong woman in power, as she was in contemporary records, was so anachronistic to their traditions that it was not something they felt they should commit into later historical records. Regardless, we can't ignore that contemporary sources do give her an extremely large measure of power in the running of the empire. One of the most important representations of this in the archaeological record is that of the Pazarsek, and that is the best I can do to pronounce that because I don't speak that language. Stela, which is a boundary marker in modern-day Turkey, which commemorates her participation in a military campaign. Her presence in this stela represents a significant break from formulaic royal inscriptions, which is important to the historiography of the region, as variations were often ideologically and historically important. This stela reads, "Boundary stone of Adad Nirari, king of Assyria, son of Shamshi Adad, king of Assyria, and of Shammuramat, queen of Shamshi Adad, king of Assyria, mother of Adad Nirari, mighty king, king of Assyria, daughter-in-law of Shalmaneser, king of the Four Corners." So the rest of that stela is relatively unimportant except for a section where it says, "Caused Adad Nirari, king of Assyria, and Shammuramat, queen, to cross the Euphrates River," before describing his conquest of the people that he was fighting against. The majority of what that stela says is unimportant for our purposes, except to highlight that the break from tradition is in Adad Nirari listing both his mother and father in his line of descent, as previous to this you would only list your father, and then describing Lady Shammuramat as having participated with him in the crossing of the river, even if it doesn't list her as participating in the campaign itself. That might have just been too far from tradition, a line to break. Further cementing herself as a woman who wielded an extremely large amount of power that was typically relegated to men is the fact that she was able to erect a stela in Assur, the ceremonial center of the Neo-Assyrian Empire at the time. Inside of Assur, there are many stelas erected by various officials, generals, and kings, but in all of the ones that we have extant today, only 3 we know of were erected by women. One by Lebali Sarat, the wife of Ashurbanipal, the last great king of Assyria. One by a wife of Sennacherib, possibly Nakia or Tasmetu Sarat, or another unnamed wife who's featured in the Hebrew Bible in his campaign in the Levant. And Shammuramat. The purpose of these stela is unknown, but the fact that she was one of the only women to erect her own stela here is relevant to her power and control within this empire. Her titles are listed the same as the one in the boundary stela. She's also mentioned in a couple of inscriptions in the Assyrian capital of Kalhu, both on statues dedicated to the god Nabu. Outside of this, we know nothing about her personal life, nothing about the circumstances of her death, as previously stated, nothing about the circumstances of her birth, and nothing about her other than the evidence of the influence and power that she held through simply the ability to erect stela that proclaimed her name in the historical record in a way that no other woman had managed thus far. So we know nothing about her, essentially, is what we're saying, but we know that she existed, which is more than any other Neo-Assyrian queen, essentially. Like, she existed in a position of relative power, which is impressive. It really is. But that does lead us then to Semiramis, right? So the story of the warrior queen and heroine Semiramis, although being based on Lady Shammuramat, has over the centuries taken on a life of its own. She was wife to 2 of the most influential figures in Assyrian mythology and has since been represented in Levantine, Greco-Roman, and Persian traditions as a demigod, attributed with great military victories and the regional invention of a certain type of pants. You know you've made it when you invented a type of pants. To which I told Nick that she'd better be wearing pants in her art. I was informed summarily that she was not, and I do think that that is bullshit.
Look, I took a look at a shit ton of historical and literary depictions of her. I could not find a single fucking one that depicted her in pants.
Well, to be fair, that might have been because you weren't looking at the correct depictions. She wore pants to disguise herself as her son and pretend to be a man.
Okay.
So maybe one of those portraits of her son is actually her.
I think you're just obsessed with pants.
Look.
I don't blame you. But I think you're obsessed with pants.
Irregardless, the legendary figure of Semiramis has been recorded into literary tradition by over 80 different authors in the ancient world alone, including Eusebius, Justinus, and Plutarch. One of the most common literary sources for her story is that of Diodorus Siculus, who we also visited 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago for Atalanta, who was strongly influenced by Ctesias of Cnidus, although the writings of Semiramis do not always agree with one another between these two authors. Dialing in on his particular variant of her story, Diodorus says that she was the daughter of Dercato of Ascalon, a fish goddess and a mortal man. He says that the goddess abandoned her when she was born, drowning herself, and until the royal shepherd was able to find her, she was fed by doves. She then married the general Ones, who served under King Ninus. Her wisdom allowed her to become an advisor to the king, and she led him to many great successes. During the siege of Bactria, she herself led a party of soldiers to capture a major victory, resulting in the successful capture of the city. King Ninus was struck with love for her, and he asked his general to give her to him as a wife, offering in exchange his daughter Sonane in return, and also threatening to enact violence upon himself if Ones did not obey. Then, because of his fear of the king, Ones would end up killing himself. Ninus then married Semiramis. Following their marriage, they did have a son together named Ninyas, and during King Ninus' campaigns to conquer Asia, he was fatally wounded. As a result, Semiramis felt it necessary to dress as her son and take command of the army. According to Diodorus, she reigned as king for 42 years, pursuing the subjugation and conquering of Asia during that period. Ctesias of Cnidus generally holds that Semiramis during this period killed her lovers when they threatened her power and chose to never remarry out of fear for holding her position. She was responsible for the restoration of the ancient city of Babylon and the erection of a brick wall surrounding the city, and is also said to have built palaces all across Persia, including that of Ecbatana. Ecbatana later became the capital of the Median kingdom, and then the summer capital of both the Parthian and Achaemenid empires. It then remained relevant during the Seleucid and Sasanian empires. During this 42-year span of conquest and expansion, she successfully added both Ethiopia and Libya into the empire, and eventually went to war against the king of India, Supratika. She actually attempted to beat him through a form of trickery by creating an army of false elephants using the skin of gray buffaloes stretched over camels. But during the counterattack, she ended up receiving a wound and most of her main force was decimated, which meant that she and the surviving members of her military were forced to cross the Indus and retreat back to the west. This might be, in fact, a parallel to the campaign of Alexander the Great crossing the Indus River, even in its failure. Semiramis herself died as part of an assassination plot on behalf of her son, Ninyas, who is often recorded as a weak man who is perceived negatively. The accuracy of these stories is to be debated, as even though Diodorus' account is the one that we take most of her legend from, he did mistakenly attribute an inscription to her that was produced by Darius the Great, and it's possible that when he saw the rock relief he mistook one character for another and then incorporated it into his writings and stories, and if he did it once, who's to say he didn't do it more than once? Aside from Diodorus in the ancient world, she's associated closely with the symbols of the fish and the dove, especially since her statue at the temple of Hierapolis Bambyce was shown with a golden dove on her head. Her name is also applied to monuments all across Anatolia and Western Asia, with many places also bearing her name in slightly changed forms. Herodotus says that she is the one who built the artificial banks meant to confine the Euphrates, and he says that he knew who she was because her name was written on one of the gates of Babylon. Many Greek geographers and philosophers accredit her with huge structures all throughout Mesopotamia, and large works of antiquity near the Euphrates have often been at one point or another ascribed to her in particular. One of the last times she appears in important historical accounts in antiquity is that of the Roman historian Ammianus Marcellinus, who says that she was the first person to carry out the castration of young men to create eunuchs. Not all of the stories of her from antiquity are positive ones, as there are negative portrayals of her in the Armenian tradition, probably because of Victoria's military campaigns that she enacted against them. One of the legends they have is that she was a sorceress who fell in love with their king, Ara the Handsome. Ara Ara. And when he refused to marry her, she gathered her armies and marched against Armenia. It said she wanted him to be spared so that she could still marry him after the defeat of his people, but after his death she took his body and prayed to the deities to raise him from the dead. She then disguised one of her lovers as Ara, saying that he had been brought back to life by the gods to convince the Armenians to give up. This conflict could perhaps be linked to the campaign of Adid-Nirari III, at least one of which was against Urartu, which was an Armenian precursor group. Outside of this local tradition, however, up until the end of antiquity and the rise of Christianity, she was generally portrayed as a positive figure who expanded and built an empire. Now, Nick Nack has informed me that if I want to discuss the Hanging Gardens of Babylon at any point, this is the video to do it in, as fate probably goes with the idea that she is the one who built them. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon are one of the most mysterious monuments of the seven wonders of the ancient world. There's no certain location attributed to them. Many say that they were inside the ancient city of Babylon, hence the name, but there are others who say that they might be the Gardens of Nineveh. According to literary tradition, Semiramis did rebuild ancient Babylon, and Nineveh was one of the major cities that her husband King Ninus was the founder of, and therefore it is highly likely that according to legend and oral tradition, she may have at one point been ascribed as the person to have built them. This seems, though, to be primarily based on the writings of T.H.E of Cnidus, and it is one of the things that he and Diodorus, who attests it to a later king, disagree on. Lady Shammuramat, the historical figure, has no connection to Babylon unless as a proposed origin or birthplace, even extending to the fact that Adad-Nirari III did not even control Babylon during his reign. Regardless, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon were supposedly an amazing feat of engineering consisting of a large collection of gardens built in a tiered format that contained all manner of greenery and resembled large green mountains. And I can see the link to her being the person who built the earthworks that controlled the Euphrates as part of the construction, possibly in this narrative. Something else I think is important to bring up is that Semiramis is often lauded as the demigod daughter of Atargatis, also known as Derkito. She was one of the most important goddesses in the north of Syria during antiquity and is primarily a fertility and love goddess. Her chief sanctuary was at Hierapolis, where Semiramis built her great temple. Atargatis is in many ways the Syrian equivalent of Aphrodite, with Aphrodite herself often being connected to Ishtar in the Mesopotamian mythology, Inanna of the Sumerian mythology, Isis of Egyptian mythology, and the goddess Ashtarte. Her symbols are that of a dove, which is her symbol of love, and fish for fertility and the waters of life. And according to ancient sources in Syria, men who wished to be priests to Atargatis would often castrate themselves. In Apuleius' Metamorphosis, or the Golden Hind, there is a line about the followers of the Syrian goddess who did such things as castrate themselves. I think this is maybe a good place to move into here. Moving into the Christian era...
Yeah, I recognize this article.
Yeah, you should. Semiramis' representation changed. In the Middle Ages, she's often associated with lustfulness and promiscuity, with stories claiming that she had incestuous relationships with her son under the justification of passing a law to legitimize it, and that she was the one who invented the chastity belt to deter any sort of romantic rivalry on her part. According to a classical source, her son Ninyas killed her because she attempted to have incestuous relations with him. She was also portrayed as having relations with a horse. Another similarity to Catherine the Great, Semiramis, also known as Semiramis of the North, which we'll get to in a little bit.
The fastest way to discredit someone is to accuse them of having sexual attraction to a horse.
It really is. Dante, in the first part of his Divine Comedy, the Inferno, puts her amongst the souls of the lustful in the second circle of hell, and in the third canto of the Triumph of Love, written by Petrarch, she is one of three women who exemplifies evil love, the others being Byblis and Mira. The Florentine author Giovanni Boccaccio also included her in his biography of women in Western literature. Her reputation did recover somewhat in the later Middle Ages and throughout the Renaissance, being included in the Book of the City of Ladies, and often found on the Nine Worthies list for women. As a short explanation, the Nine Worthies is an accumulation of 9 scriptural, historical, and/or legendary men who were said to personify ideas of chivalry during the Middle Ages. All would be referred to as prince, regardless of what their historical title might have been, and the original list for men included Hector, Alexander the Great, and Julius Caesar, along with 3 Jewish men, Joshua, David, and Judas Maccabeus, and then 3 Christians, King Arthur, Charlemagne, and Godfrey of Bouillon. This created a trio of trios, meaning that they had the 3 best pagans, the 3 best of Jewish descent, and the 3 best Christians, according to various authors of the time. And because during the Middle Ages there was a sort of desire for symmetry when it came to things, there was also a list for women made, although it did have a greater variance from author and writer to writer, which often included Penthesilea, Tamiris, and Semiramis, amongst other women.
We should recognize 2 of those names by this point.
Yep. And this is how she gets added to the fucking conspiracy board with King Arthur because of the 9 worthies list. Notably, when it comes to the Christian representation of her character, a major thing we need to discuss is The Two Babylons. This is a book that was written in 1853 by Alexander Hislop, a Christian minister. His book claims that Semiramis invented polytheism and the ideas of goddess worship, and his work is particularly polarizing in that he characterizes her as the whore of Babylon. He makes a grand conspiracy claim that there is a secret that has been held for millennia by the head of the Catholic Church, that the Catholic Church itself was founded by the biblical king Nimrod and Semiramis in order to propagate pagan religions of ancient Babylon. He asserts that she was the mother of Nimrod, meaning that Nimrod and Ninyas would be the same character, as well as his queen consort, and participated in the building of the Tower of Babel. He then says that they had incestuous relations and that their male offspring became the deity Dumuzid, also known as Tammuz. His book states that all divine pairings across all religions are simply retellings of the story of Semiramis and Nimrod and the parentage of Tammuz. Today, many modern scholars of history and religion criticize him on the basis that it's possible that he mistook Ninus for Nimrod and then chose to pick and mix different parts of myth from different cultures to fit the narrative that he was trying to tell. But this did actually become very polarizing and influential in evangelical Christian communities of the late 1800s and early 1900s, especially in America. She appears in a number of plays, as well as being the titular character of Voltaire's tragedy Semiramis, and is mentioned in Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus and The Taming of the Shrew. Some authors reference her in comparison to Elizabeth I of England, Margaret I of Denmark, and Catherine the Great, who were all given the metaphorical title Semiramis of the North during their lives or after.
Semiramis of the North!
Yes. Chaucer in his Canterbury Tales also had a character compared to her, the mother of the Sultan in The Man of Law's Tale, and she's appeared in a number of films in the 20th century, including The Queen of Babylon in 1954 and I Am Semiramis in 1963. I think that was possibly more in-depth than you thought I'd go, because I did decide to go down that kind of literary route, but I felt like it was important to make the connection here to the Whore of Babylon, because we did already discuss that, and this felt like a good way to round it out.
I remember seeing that when I was doing my little poking around. I knew, I figured this would come up.
Yeah.
So, before we go, take a crack at the class here.
I don't think she's a ruler, because that's typically saints and people who are kind of martyred for their causes and such.
Oh my god, you're learning.
Shut the fuck up. It doesn't help that it's called the ruler class. Just call it the fucking saint class. But at the same time, she doesn't feel like a character who would be like a saber or an archer. Because there's nothing that attests her to that. Perhaps because of the parallels to Alexander, I would say rider. Maybe. But I feel like she could also be one of those extra classes that don't show up in like the normal class lists, like something like an alter ego or something like that. I don't know what she would be though. Okay. So I suppose for the normal classes, my guess would be rider.
You are wrong this time. She's actually going to be an assassin.
Okay. Interesting.
I'm pretty sure this is part of the attestation to the idea that she was killing all of the
lovers to prevent them from taking power. Okay. All right. I'm going to get a better look at this. Oh. Interesting. You know what this kind of reminds me of? It's kind of like a black and gold version of Rasputin. Like some of Rasputin's designs. And not Rasputin, but the Angry Mango.
Angramayu?
Yeah. Yes.
I do appreciate that you defaulted to the Angry Mango, though.
I couldn't remember his name for once. I think this is one of those designs that just completely differs from anything that might be like historically attested, and so I really have no commentary on that. But I do like the design. I think it's interesting. Certainly not as much as I liked Atalanta, but it is interesting.
So Semiramis is actually Assassin of Red from Fate Apocrypha, and Fate is going to hone in on her use of poisons, actually.
Okay.
She believes it's important to remain dominant and in control of any given situation. As a result of her being abandoned by her mother, she views her mother very negatively and does not have the most positive view of mothers as a result. She doesn't hate mothers, but she despises women who become mothers solely for a man's sake with no investment in the actual responsibility of life-giving. What this results in is a particularly manipulative person always trying her best to remain in perfect control of the people around her. Many have rather poor perceptions of her as a result, especially those who hate manipulative people. Particularly Mordred draws a lot of parallels between her and Morgan Le Fay.
Okay.
On a more positive note, her master in the Grail was Amakusa Shiro Tokisada.
Aww.
The two would act as the main antagonists of the series, really pulling the strings of the conflict up till the very end. But the two would eventually end up falling into a bit of a romantic dynamic, actually. The two would dance around the subject and often each other, as at the end of the day, they are both awkward misanthropes with the emotional expression abilities on par with middle school children. I'll bring up the Hanging Gardens of Babylon now, since you did mention, yes, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon is something going to be associated with her character.
Oh.
But, and it's going to be her noble phantasm later, but she did not build them. This is one of those situations where she gets it because it's so widely attested to her, even if it's incorrect.
Which is so funny, because it doesn't actually seem to be widely attested to her. Most sources agree that it was either Nebuchadnezzar or Ashurbanipal or like a different. It's so, that's one of those things I think is so funny, is because it seems like Galatea's name is a modern creation, right? This seems like the same thing. It seems like she's being more associated with the Hanging Gardens in the modern day because of like a single line.
One mistake changes.
Not even a mistake, but just one person's recording. Because like it made Diodorus and Ctesias didn't agree, and Ctesias is the only person who attested to it for her in the ancient world.
I mean, if you think about it, though, this is not uncommon for Fate. Like, remember, we do have Antonio Salieri in Fate as well, who gains, like, pretty much all of his characterization in Fate, and Fate acknowledges it, that it's from a book that was completely inaccurate.
Yeah, which is fair. I do think it's really interesting in this case, because, like, yeah, it is an ancient source. It's just the corroboration of said ancient source is not ancient. It's modern.
It's a popular retelling.
Yeah.
It's just incorrect. It's misinformation.
Because if you look up the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, there's a couple places where it'll take you to like museum websites and stuff, and in a lot of those museum websites it'll say, oh, this was also once called the Hanging Gardens of Semiramis, but it won't cite the source as to why they're saying that. And I'm like, I just know how you got this.
But yeah, Fate does know that she did not actually build it. She will say herself that this is not something she owned in her life.
Okay. All right, I've got relationships. So Amakusa Shiro Tokisada. Oh, nothing. Don't worry about it, master. All of that happened in another world. It is not a memory I should hold or cherish. That battle and those feelings are hers. They belong to the one who fought in the other world. Okay. Jeanne d'Arc. The thing that most riles me about her is that she does not even consider herself a saint. She will never know or understand how countless people have dreamed of possessing such spirit and status. Shakespeare, master, I'm warning you. That man is up to no good. I suggest you take his life, or his ability to think, immediately. Come, I will concoct a poison while you apprehend him. Titus Andronicus might have been... So I've never read Titus Andronicus, but I'm assuming based on that line that there's potentially... He might have referenced her being like a poisonous.
Possibly. I'll just say they're both in Apocrypha. There's another situation of Apocrypha memories.
Okay.
And just her not... She was on the same side as Shakespeare, which is arguably worse than being his enemy.
Atalanta, is she still holding on to that dream of hers? She should have abandoned it long ago. I do not mind people who harbor unattainable dreams, but hers is just so sorrowful. As two people who were both abandoned by their mothers. Achilles, so that insensitive hero is here too. He is trouble, and in a different sense than Shakespeare. And he does it unconsciously too. Oh man, they are not compatible with Mordred. I see that, and she disrespects every monarch. I love that for her. Love that for her. Yeah, that's right. I love Shiro. The Amakusa Shiro Tokisada specifically. This is the funny thing is we had to kind of kind of rushed to get Atalanta and Semiramis done because we're actually... I don't know when the video's coming up in relation to this, but we are watching Fate Apocrypha right now, and we wanted to give me time to not have to binge it in one day.
There are other servants we haven't done with Fate Apocrypha yet, but this is like, these were like right around the corner on the schedule. Like, okay, let's get this out of the way before you start watching that.
Mm-hmm. Just checking through some of the extra art.
Like, we will not get to them before that video goes up, before we even watch it, but Chiron and Avike Braun are also
Avisa Braun, yeah. Okay, that makes sense, yeah. Oh. Snack. So those are like anime.
Yeah.
I'm not going to look at those right now. All right. Abilities.
So, while Semiramis is an assassin with a skill for poison, she's also a fully functional caster servant in terms of abilities, as well, to the point where she could be called a caster as much as an assassin. She has the ability to recreate various types of poisons and can summon mystical beasts to fight for her. She isn't sneaky so much as she is subtle. She doesn't sneak around enemy strongholds like one might expect of an assassin. Instead, it's more like you have the little chance of noticing her slipping poison into your tea the moment you let your guard down. She also has a massive familiar network of doves that she can use to monitor entire countries at a time.
Which links her once again to the goddess T.H.E, also known as Atargatis. And remember, Atargatis is often synchronized with all these different goddesses, including Ashtart. And we already discussed Ashtart because we had... Ashtart was a part of Space Ishtar?
Yes.
Yeah. And then then also connecting that to... Aphrodite and Isis and Inanna and Ishtar, because we also have Ishtar as a servant. So it's kind of... This is a funny thing is, like, all of these goddesses, Atargatis, Ashtart, Ishtar, Inanna, Isis, Aphrodite, Venus, they're all love and fertility deities that were, like, really popular, like, all across sort of North Africa, the Mediterranean area, and into the Levant and sort of Persia and Syria regions. And there's an argument to be made that some of the older ones here, like Astarte and Atargatis, potentially were part of the inspiration for some of the way that some of the later deities were interpreted, right? Like Venus and such. And I do believe either Atargatis or Ashtart was actually brought over into Egypt, right, as a goddess separately, as part of their pantheon. And they also, both Atargatis and Ashtart had worship centers all through Greece and Rome, like all over the place, like in Italy itself and everything. So
the last little note here is that she has a divinity which allows her to create fish scales on her body, which can act as a solid defensive barrier.
Because T.H.E is a fish, because the fish is connected to the water of life, and T.H.E is a fish goddess.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so territory creation, presence, concealment, item instruction, that makes sense. Familiar dove, there's the connection to the doves. So move down to the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, her noble phantasm.
So this is not a particularly practical noble phantasm. Actually, it's rather hilariously hard to make work.
Mm-hmm.
You might ask why? Well, it's because Semiramis needs materials to create it. She needs specific types of soil and stone in order to even form the gardens.
Because the soil has to support all the different plants, and then the stone has to be able to hold the weight of the soil after it has been saturated with water and roots. It also needs to be irrigated by the Euphrates River.
Yup.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, this is not something you just pull out of your pocket.
No.
But once it's raised, it becomes a flying fortress capable of empowering Semiramis and reducing the abilities of all other servants inside. On top of that, it acts as an offensive mobile base as well, capable with the firing power comparable to bombs and meteors being dropped on the land below.
I mean, canonically, according to legend, Semiramis did build like large walls around ancient Babylon after she restored it. So if you follow that the Hanging Gardens of Babylon are indeed in Babylon, she not only rebuilt, like literally from the ground up, funded essentially and directed the rebuilding of the Hanging Gardens, and then transformed them into a fortress with the addition of walls. I see she's got a second noble phantasm, Sikera Usum.
Yes, so Semiramis can only use this noble phantasm while on a throne. With it, she can immediately fill the room she is in with all manners of deadly poisons that are nearly impossible to survive unless a hero possesses an anecdote of surviving poison. On top of that, she becomes capable of summoning any monster associated with poison, regardless of era or mythology they are from.
Okay. I believe we already... Yeah, it's the same person who did Atalanta Alter, which means the only two people I haven't seen now from this artist are Avisabron and Chiron.
Yep.
And I am excited to see them at some point. Some point that is not now. Oh, can I close this?
Yeah.
All right. And then we'll watch her. Oof. It's like someone took like an asp but then made it bigger and nastier. I love that. Seems like she's got a little bit more versatility than Atalanta in animation. I only say because we did Atalanta so recently. It's an easy comparison.
6, 7 years old now, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, so around the same age. Okay. A little disappointed there's not more greenery in them. A little disappointed. Couldn't add a little bit of foliage there? Just a little bit. Alright. Okay, gallery. Alright, we've got April Fools. Adorable. Oh, with the little birdie. And once again, oh, she must be the coach or something.
Look, she's wearing pants. Happy?
I am, actually. She's wearing pants in both of those images, and I'm here for it. Just go. Why?
Because the internet hates you.
Why? Oh, shit. Why is... It's really not... Oh, God. I have like a... The page is, like, not loading either. Okay.
But that ad is playing in perfect quality.
Yeah, I can't get rid of it. All right. Give it a second. I should be able to... Hey! Pages become unresponsive. Like, entirely. What the fuck? Okay. All right. Make my life... I want the Fate Grand Order wiki. Try to make my life a little easier. Can I?
No.
Okay. So there's like... Can't... That's like smoke, though. I'm a little disappointed they didn't put a tiny bit of greenery on it. A little bit. Just a little bit. Okay, we do have a fair amount of extra art from her artist. Racing. See, yep, the same racing. Just smiling. We love that. Like a military dress. Yeah, yeah. Cute. So that's one of her. Oh, it shows the back of her outfit with all the hair out of the way. Her and Emiya. With
no, Amakusa.
Jean. Oh, yeah, Amakusa. It was Jean and...
Dantes. Is that Jean in the background there?
Yeah, it's got the...
Ah, okay.
Yeah. It's not very detailed, but it's got the Jean... Oh my god, it's a construction worker. It's a pickaxe. That's how I looked this summer. Because remember, I even had the hard hat in some of the images. Okay. Alright, Chaldea sketch. Okay, that's it for the extra art. I did like that one a lot, though. This is definitely my favorite.
I think I've read somewhere they actually referenced that art in in the game at one point.
I'm gonna be so for real. I really like this art. This might be one of my favorite arts I've seen in a while. It just makes me happy. Huh. Just a different layout of the NP. All right. Okay, ambiguous chalice. You have formed a strong bond with me. Wonderful. And so I trust you implicitly. I shall fight beside you with all the strength that I possess. Yet, trust sometimes becomes a burden. Trust banishes all suspicion, making it unnecessary, unwelcome, and that can lead to pain. Distrust is a good thing. Be wary of those who are enraged over your distrust. Those are the people who have the most to hide, with secrets they hope others will never discover. That is why you must continue to be watchful, vigilant. No matter how versed an individual is in deception, the act itself is unnatural. That unnatural behavior will always reveal itself eventually. But I digress. Come now, I swear this cup contains no poison. Do you believe my words? Would you?
This seems like emotional manipulation.
Chocolates of perfidy. Did I say there was no poison in it? Yes, I suppose I did. But think about it, master. Poison doesn't work on you, and this small amount of poison would not affect servants either. So that means it is not really poison, but simply chocolates that only you can enjoy. And at the same time, this is also chocolate that someday you will no longer be able to eat. Isn't this how a servant-master relationship works? Don't let that sadden you. After all, it is still delicious. All you need to do right now is indulge in it. It feels like you take a bite. Why is it spicy? You know what I mean? Add a little spice.
Look, spicy chocolate is a thing.
I know, it's delicious. It's one of my favorite types of chocolate. The moment of peace. She kind of just... Oh, he's on her lap. Okay.
Yeah.
So I definitely saw this when we did a Makusa, so I will skip it.
Yeah.
All right. Oh. Sublime and delicious. A faint warmth can be felt from within the cool box. You can open it as well. The key is in your hands. Of course, a greater puzzle may await you once it's unsealed. The mysterious empress awaits your choice with a regal smile. Okay. And mushrooming.
You won't know who one of those people are.
Is it this person?
Yeah, you don't know who that is.
Do I know this person? Oh, that's Serenity, isn't it? Aww. They are making poison. This is poison cooking. Remember Bianchi from Kitekyo Hitman?
Kind of looks like it, too.
Yeah, poison cooking Bianchi. Although it's all mushrooms. Did you notice? These are like hallucinogenic mushrooms.
Which is a wonder that, what's her name's not
Locusta, yeah. But this is probably
before.
earlier than Locusta. So I'll skip it because this is definitely for a different character.
Yeah.
That would be my FGL login.
Oh, nice. I can log in, too.
As we both immediately...
Actually, we might not be allowed in right now.
Well, we'll see.
Because Lost Belt 7 Part 2 launches tomorrow, so that might be a maintenance.
Well, we'll see. It is, in fact, not able to be logged into. All right. As we both completely ditched any attention to this video to try to log into fucking FGO. So, I mean, that is technically it for Semiramis.
I remember who our next two servants are. I can't remember which one we're doing first.
I can. Not Apple Boy. Man, you're struggling. I'm enjoying this.
Look, I was expecting more out of you. You're the one that has, like, all the epic soundtrack memorized. Although I guess they only spend a couple songs on the
Also, this character was never referenced in the epic soundtrack.
If it's not Apple Boy, there is literally one time where they're referenced, because that's, like, one of the few songs I listen to a lot.
Hang on. Agamemnon will flank the guards. Diomedes will let his maid through the gates, take the whole city at large. Teucer will shoot any ambush attack, and little Ajax will stay back. Nestor, secure Helen and protect her. Dio, avenge your father, kill the brothers. He is mentioned.
You have to cut that line.
Yeah, I'll cut it like right at kill the brothers off. Yeah. Oh, I'll just mute myself. All right, you guys are gonna hear one word muted, and then I'm gonna say it is in there.
Go listen to Epic; it's good.
It really is, and it's over now, so you can enjoy the entire musical all in one go. And I think if you're smart and savvy and don't mind watching multiple different creators' art, there are complete playlists that include an animatic for every single song.
What are your favorite songs from Epic?
Okay, so this is.
tangent here, but I just while we have it brought up.
Yeah, no, it's valid. I think that this is a fun place to do it, anyways, because we'll talk about it again.
Yeah.
Like eventually, but this is a fun place to do it because we're already talking about it. So I think for me that depends because I really feel like Act 1 and Act 2 have very different vibes, right? I have different favorite songs. So in Act 1, I really like the intro song, right? Like Horse and the Infant, right? Because for me it's reminiscent of the Iliad and it calls back to all these characters. So it is one of my favorite songs in the first half of the musical. There's definitely a few others that I like. I am kind of a fan of pretty much anything with Athena in it. I do really like her parts. But in the second half of the musical, I'm a big fan of Telemachus's songs. So I really like Legendary. I really like Little Wolf. And then, of course, for me, Odysseus is a really popular song. I think the love songs from the very end are growing on me slowly, but I didn't initially like them because it did feel a little bit like whiplash to go from a song like Odysseus into like some of those like heavy, really emotional love songs at the end. But I do tend to really like the kind of like Legendary, Little Wolf, like the more poppy fight songs. I do really like Hold 'Em Down. It's kind of got that Disney villain thing going where it's like, God, Antinous is a piece of human shit, but always the song so catchy. Hold him down.
My favorites, because I've heard a good chunk of them in your car. I haven't ever listened to it beginning.
You might not have heard the last like 2 sagas worth of songs,
but I've heard a good chunk of them at this point. My favorite are probably like the normie favorites. I think the Horse and the Infant.
Actually, that's not a big normie favorite.
Really?
No, yeah, that's not. I think a lot of people just view it as kind of like a way to like vaguely introduce the fact that it's following up the Iliad, and it's not really a whole lot of people's favorites that I've heard.
And then obviously, like I like There Are Other Ways.
Oh yeah, you really like the Circe saga, right? Yeah.
And then this is a recent one. This one grew on me a lot. God Games, I love, and I know that's definitely.
That's a crowd favorite. Ironically, not one of my favorites. I actually have issues with God Games.
I mean, a lot of it's just downright wrong. Like, come on.
Well, I mean, it's actually not that so much. There's other issues I have with God Games. So I mean, that's separate. Was it? But there are other ways of persuasion. I think my favorite way to use that song is I've seen all the people of like where it's like Zeus threatening Odysseus or Poseidon threatening Odysseus, and then they just go to the animatics and they're like, Odysseus is, there are other ways of persuasion. And then like Poseidon and Zeus and the animatics just being like, what?
Just in case we're emphasizing it too much here, no, Odysseus is not the next servant.
No, yeah. He is on the schedule, but he's not the next servant. Yeah. So it just felt like, since we already used it as the reference for the next servant. But yeah, so we'll see you guys next time to talk about that servant. And then technically I gave a hint for the one after as well. Apple Boy.
Oh, you're going to keep that in?
Yeah, I'll keep Apple Boy in.
Oh, shit.
So you guys might know the next 2 servants. But yeah, like, comment, subscribe.